What's up? This is Into the Storm. Triumph, tragedy, transformation. Buffaloes, not cowards. Buffaloes wisely fight into the storm, not painfully away from the storm like cowards. Be the buffalo, not the cow. This is raw, real, and rewarding for men with a spiritual emphasis. I'm Ryan Smith, your host, and it's my privilege to be with your co-host, Bunker Weimer. This is your podcast. By joining us, you join the community of post-secularism, vanguards combining the one Eastern religious spiritual values with Western secular and scientific understanding. It's time to stop operating as if one is better than the other. We're really just talking about the same thing, operating with one objective, truth.
Before we jump into it, we want to let you know of even more incredible opportunities to learn and, more importantly, discover healing for yourself and those you love. You can learn more at tttransformation.com and theryancsmith.com for one-on-one coaching and large-scale speaking events to transform your relationships and your life. Be part of the action.
Oh, great. Let's get into it. Well, Bunker, this is you're leading this out today, and so this is a fun thing, and I'm excited for what you have. Take it away, Bunker.
Awesome. Appreciate it. So we titled today's episode as Growth and Spirituality. So a little bit of background, I guess, of why we decided to pick this topic. It was a little bit more my doing. As I have the opportunity to talk
to it.
Yeah. Ryan threw me to the wolves. No, it's been great. As I get to talk to many different people, as you mature and grow in your life, I feel like I've come to really understand that I don't have any answers for people a lot of the times, especially when they're in suffering and pain. And I heard something a little bit ago about being a peacemaker. So I was listening to a BYU devotional, and the speaker shared how when we think of being a peacemaker, we think of putting ourselves between two people or a person in their conflicts, and we want to be the mediator to resolve it. But what his point was to be a true peacemaker, you're helping connect people in their suffering to a higher power. Because the theory is, or the idea is, the higher power can teach you and develop you more than I can as an individual. They have more wisdom and understanding. So coming from that perspective, I feel like we can do that ourselves. We can be a peacemaker or a mediator for our own problems and help connect ourselves to a higher power and increase our spirituality. So as we increase that spirituality, as we learn more, develop more wisdom and understanding, we will grow. And as we grow, we will be able to handle life challenges better. We will be able to transcend the difficulties of life. And perhaps the things that once were a big challenge, or the thing that we viewed as very difficult, may no longer be that anymore. It may become easy or simple, or maybe we'll even view it as a blessing.
Wow. So Bunker just gave you the whole thesis of today's. If you don't get anything more, just what Bunker said, that summarizes the whole topic of today. But now we're going to go in even deeper into the grassroots with this topic, is that how, why be spiritual? Why is that an asset? Is that even helpful? And so we want to answer that question. And so Bunker has some thoughts and he's wrestled with these questions.
Thank you. Yeah. So I think to start off, I'd like to focus on just spiritual identity. We believe that there are higher power out there. God, some people believe in the universe, but we believe that this higher power, this entity created us, and that gives us purpose, but that means that we are a part of a whole of who they are. So I think there is oftentimes we kind of do things backwards, right? So we get our worth from other people. So if someone's nice to us and they say, hey, you're really good person, then that lets us feel like we can be a good person. And then we treat ourselves the way that other people treat us, but then we also limit how God feels about us because we have come from a place of the people around us. And I think that what we should do is first understand who God is and how he feels about us, and how he feels about us is how we treat ourselves. And then as we treat ourselves is how we will generally treat other people. So it's kind of the idea of flipping the script or flipping it around. Though the world definitely has a way of doing it backwards. But as we increase that understanding of who we are talking about spiritual identity and developing that, growing and increasing our understanding of those things. Is there anything that you wanted to add on spiritual identity, Ryan?
No, yes, I do, of course. But I wonder, Bunker, just if you could maybe paint the picture that you told me, you know, when you're trying to be a peacemaker, and maybe kind of that pattern that you recognize that maybe spurred this whole topic up for you in the first place.
Yeah, I think just throughout conversation with different individuals, people have hard lives. There's difficult things that we go through. It can be very challenging. I think sometimes it goes along with us believing that how other people view us is how we can view ourselves. I think that's part of the motivation why we turn to others so much, especially people that we look up to and respect, because we think this person does things the way that I want to do them. I want to know more about what they would do in this situation. And I think what we're trying to do is when people come to us with these problems, say, hey, like, I don't really have an answer for you. Like, I don't really know what you should do, but I know that I believe in God, and I believe that he knows all things, and I believe that he can help you way better than I could help you. I think that he could help you way more than you could help yourself. And so something that you, Ryan, have talked about throughout different podcasts is consider the lilies, you know, the scripture in, what's that called? The Sermon on the Mount. Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow, they toil not, nor do they spin. And I think that there is a lot of wisdom in such a simple phrase, because we are surrounded by so many distractions, so much content, so much information, and some of it sounds really good, but I think some of it takes away from spirituality. We have so much interest in learning that sometimes we go to the wrong source or the wrong teacher, and some things sound like quick fixes. So I guess what I am offering is we have difficulty in our life, and there are a lot of people with a lot of things that can be good, but we're saying we go straight to the source of all truth and all wisdom. And as we receive this wisdom and truth from a higher power, that we will be able to more quickly, more efficiently, and more permanently resolve things in our life. Do you feel like that's an adequate explanation?
Yes. There's so much gold in that, and let's maybe just thin that out a little bit more so really digest that.
Absolutely.
You know, Bunker, you had told me, you know, someone that really cares, someone that really wants to make a difference in this world and give back, I think, the kindness and love that you've received. And you want to, when you see someone hurting, you're the kind of guy that takes, you know, the coat off your back and you'd give it to them, and you'd be naked if that was the price. And I know that you're that kind of guy that just you're there for people in their low parts. You know, if we go to war, Bunker, I want you as my battle buddy. And I know that you're that kind of guy. And so I think this is what really inspired you to talk about this topic. And you'd said when you're a peacemaker, usually we think of that in two people having a conflict, and the peacemaker therefore mediates the conflict between the two and helps them to come up with a win-win, peaceful agreement at the end. But the problem with that is the peacemaker, if that's your role and like trying to just put out fires all the time, that's exhausting, and it requires a lot of skill sets on you if that's how you view yourself, peacemaker. But I think what you're offering here today for you listening, yes, I'm speaking to you, is that as the peacemaker, you probably see yourself as someone that tries to be there for, and is like Bunker, that wants to take the shirt off your back and give it to other people. The best way to do it isn't to come up with the strategy and for you to be the Hercules. That's just so exhausting. What we're offering is that if you can if you can take the problem and transcend the problem into a spiritual light, that's enough. That alone can maybe solve the problem. And if it doesn't solve the problem, at least it puts it in its proper place, and you can stop toiling, which you had talked about. Toil means to work really, really hard. And that just like the lilies of the field, they toil not, neither do they spin. But it's what Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed as one as thee. sees. And so if you can just relax and let God take care of you, and he's aware of every hair that falls from your head, he's aware of every sparrow that falls, and he's super aware of you. He knows you. You're not abandoned. And if that puts things in proper place. And so so what we're saying is life is hard, and there's a lot of pain and suffering. What we talked about last week, pain happens when your model of the world does not match your reality. That's pain, and pain is inevitable. Life is suffering, as the Buddhist first of the Four Noble Truths teaches us. But it's a whole nother thing when you don't have a solution to those problems. Then you begin to suffer. And I guess suffers, maybe I'm using suffer in two different contexts here, but ultimately and how Jeff talked about last week, is there's a second arrow. Life, you're going to get hit by the arrows of the world, but if you don't have a spiritual backing, you're going to get hit a second time with a second arrow, and it's going to cut even deeper. But if you can have a spiritual backing, the pain of the world and the problems you have, it doesn't dry your bones where you're at a place where you're just abandon all hope. And so spirituality doesn't maybe solve every problem, but it puts it in its proper place, and it gives you an ability to navigate life knowing that there's hope. Like, for example, I think a big allegory, I guess, or metaphor is the ship lost at sea, but if it can see the lighthouse on the harbor and knows where it's going, the storm isn't as bad. You know how far away it is. You're really close to the shore. You know which direction you can go. So spirituality is like that lighthouse that puts things in its proper perspective. You don't get shot, but if you're just lost at sea and there's storm, and we talked about that rat, that was swimming, and when it knew that it could be saved, it was able to exponentially work so much harder and swim a lot longer than give up a few minutes. Rather, the rat was able to swim for hours, is in our last test. So yeah, I think is that what you're talking about, is that the spiritual identity is a real help in these times so that it doesn't bite as hard.
No, absolutely. I think that was a great summary, and I think the spiritual identity is very much an anchor in our lives throughout difficult things. I think also, kind of going along with what you've said, is as we increase spirituality and understand more of who we are in a spiritual identity, we're developing skills to teach us how to fish and not just waiting for fish to be given to us. I think that's something very important, and that's an important life skill, because as we are able to take initiative and have like a capacity to do things for ourselves and know what to do in what situations, it makes things a lot better. We're not at the mercy of the storm as much. Like you said, we have a lighthouse. Like if we see the lighthouse, we know where we're going. Although it still might be difficult to get there, it gives us a direction, and directions are super important, because if you go the wrong way, you can find yourself very, very far away from shore. One thing that I wanted to get into,
it's just so easy to get discouraged. There's been a few times when I went hiking and there wasn't a path, and I was just bushwhacking it. And my speed when I was able to get from point A to point B was like, when I can be on a trail, it's not just that it's maybe I have to take bigger steps or have to watch my step more. Like I can just cruise on a trail like hiking, but when you're just not really sure where you're going, and I did a lot of land navigation in the military, and when you don't have a trail, your speed it's hard. And I just think in life, if you don't know who you are as a child, a son of God, like when you lose that and lose that God has your life, it just makes all the difference. And lately I've been waking up in the morning, my prayers saying, God, you gave me my body, you gave me this day. Yes, I have my plan for what I'm wanting to do, but the day is yours. Teach me, guide me. I'm like water in your cup. Pour me where you want me to. And then there's somewhat, when I have this humility to just go where he wants me to go, when things don't go the way that I want it to, and bad things happen, it's like, maybe this is God. Maybe there's a silver lining that I can't see, and I can put my doubts and replace those. And that ultimately, you are what you practice. Whatever you practice, you get better at. And so like, consistency is so big, but if you have despair stopping you in your tracks, it's just hard to ever accomplish anything. So just hoping so much, especially as I've been navigating my own business here, there hasn't been maybe the lighthouse is maybe not, the golden brick road is not as clear, and I really have to be this agent to act rather than to be acted upon. I love that talk, and we've given a lot of stuff on masculinity, being the alpha leader, and the difference. That's really the summarization, the summary of being an alpha is that you act, you look at things, and you try to find solutions rather than seeing yourself a victim. If you can put yourself into like God's hands and knowing that He has this, then you can like have that clarity to act.
No, and thank you so much for sharing that story and talking about being vulnerable with your spirituality and your prayers, because I think that what you were doing was kind of trying to see things as God sees things. The scriptures are full of quotes where it says like, His ways are not our ways. It's very hard for us to really understand the decision, the thought process that God has for us in our lives. But as we experience challenges, I think something that can make all the difference for us as individuals and will help in our spiritual growth is trying to see things as God sees things, trying to understand what He's trying to have us do, so we're not kind of being hard-headed and kicking against the pricks, if we will. I think something that I have come to learn in my own life is, as you much said, Ryan, try to be like water and try to be fluid but quick to act as things are presented. Things flow a lot more smoothly in my life. Things seem just to kind of work out without a whole lot of effort on my part. Whereas on the other side, if I see a problem, I get stressed about it, it starts to consume me, and I'm doing everything I can just to like pick away at it or to make a little bit of a change. It seems to be a losing battle, and it can oftentimes result in a more negative effect on myself. And so that was one of the things I wrote down is how can we establish a relationship with God? How can we grow that relationship? Is I think trying to understand or view things in a positive way, view things in an opportunistic way instead of a negative taking away of opportunity. And so one thought that I had going along with what I said earlier was how many of us oftentimes get our worth from other people before we get our worth from God, instead of getting our worth from the Lord and letting that trickle down to how we feel about ourselves, to how we feel about others. I think that's a great question to ask is, how does God think or feel about me? So we've talked about the book, The Four Agreements, before on this podcast. And one of the parts in that says, if I showed up and somebody said something mean to me, say Ryan says, Bunker, you're ugly. I don't like you one bit. I can either get offended by that, or I can ask myself, do I think I'm ugly? Do I think I'm bad at things? And depending on the answers, depending on how I respond, if I get upset, that means that I am agreeing with what Ryan said to me. I think we can take that even one step further and say, if someone comes up to me and says, Bunker, you're stupid, I can sit there and think, does God think I'm stupid? And I think very quickly we can come to a conclusion of, no, God does not think that I'm stupid. God loves me, and God thinks that I am wonderful. God is my Father. He created me. And that, to me, has been a huge relief in many instances. And it's kind of like a superpower in a lot of ways, because you're very invulnerable to a lot of the difficulties of life. And so much as I've been a part of Ryan's journey with this podcast, I had tried to start my own construction company, and there's a lot of ups and downs with that. And I've noticed that, as I let God prevail and I kind of turn things over to Him, things just work. But it's a huge requirement of faith, because I think one thing you hear in the media a lot is work hard, work harder, and even harder. And what the Lord oftentimes is saying is, don't work too hard. Don't run more than you have strength to run. Like, let me carry this burden. Let me do these things. Take my yoke upon you. My yoke's light. Like, let me carry your heavy yoke. And so one thing that has helped me a lot and helped me develop through these stages of trying to let God prevail is really understanding what prevail means. So the definition prevail means to prove more powerful than opposing forces, i.e. to be victorious. So So if we plug that in to the equation or the phrase, let God prevail, we let God prove that he is more powerful than the opposing forces in our life, that he is victorious. And that has been very impactful for me. And that has helped grow me tremendously spiritually, because it has been all faith of letting the reins go. What's that song, Jesus Take the Wheel? Very much so. And it's just like what you talked about, Ryan, like you are water, pour me where you want, like do with me as you will. Because this life is a lot more than just about ourselves. It's about helping people on the journey. And I think sometimes when we're in crisis, when we are in difficulty, we don't see anything but besides ourselves. And I think God is saying, here, let me take care of these things. And as I do, it will give you more chance to help other people along the way. And one thing that I shared before we got on this podcast, that we always will sit and talk about some of the things that we'd like to discuss. One of the examples that came to mind was many of the miracles that Christ performed for people. He never required these people with ailments to figure it out themselves or to have an understanding. He didn't teach the man to correct his eyes or to raise someone from the dead. He didn't break it down scientifically to someone. All he required was a very small and simple thing: to follow him, to love him. He gave simple instruction. And I think that is a theme throughout the scriptures, throughout Christ's life, and that should be a theme throughout ours. In order to grow our spiritual capacity to understand more of who God is to do small and simple things. And my favorite story of small and simple things is in the Book of Kings in the Old Testament of Naaman. And Naaman was a very powerful, very important person in the Assyrian government in the world. He was a general, and he contracted leprosy, and he was very shamed by it. And it's a very dirty thing to be a leper in those days. And he felt rejected. And from his handmaiden, who was a Hebrew, he found out about the prophet Elias. And so he got in his chariot with his army, and he marches over to the prophet. And this grandiose gesture of saying, I am here, I will do whatever you ask, I have all this gold and money, I have this army at my disposal. What can you do for me in exchange for healing? Or what can I do for you in exchange for healing my leprosy? And so the prophet didn't even leave his house. He just sent his servant out and told him, go bathe in the River Jordan 7 times. And the prophet, Naaman was so offended because the prophet didn't even come out to see him, and the River Jordan's really muddy and really gross, and how dare he tell me to get into that river? And so he storms off, he goes home, and he's very upset. And as he's in his anger, his servant says, like, Naaman, you were so powerful, you were so great. Think about all that you've done, think about all that you would do in order to be healed. What he has asked you to do is very simple. Why not just try it? And I think over and over again, the Lord asks us to do very simple things. And just as Naaman did, he was healed. And just as we can, we will be healed. And so, but going full circle with being a peacemaker is, if you find yourself in a position of trying to help other people or trying to help yourself, sometimes doing the grandiose thing, doing the hard thing is not the answer. I would say it very rarely, if ever, is the answer. It's the very small and simple thing. So I've talked a lot, but Ryan, is there anything that you would like to throw in there?
Yeah, well, thank you. Though I love that story of Nate, and it's interesting that your take is slightly different than mine on how you're saying that, to go through life is the simple thing, the easy thing. And for me, I take it the opposite way, is that it's the hard thing. And I think Elijah was strategic in asking Naaman to not come out. He was stepping on his ego there, and then to go wash in the muddy River Jordan. And that was the very thing that was hardest for him. Although physically easy, spiritually it was very difficult. It really challenged him to what I call crucify his ego. And it's so hard. And so it may be physically easy to go to church, to say your prayers first thing in the morning, read your scriptures. Those are physically easy, but they're like the hardest thing to do for our ego, and they don't necessarily make sense in the moment. And I believe that there's a real wrestle maybe physically it's easy, and it's just like, look to the serpent and you'll live, like that's physically easy, but because it doesn't make sense or something like that, it challenges your left brain thinking, and you have to kill your ego in order to do it. And so I think that spirituality is very tough because it doesn't make sense to our carnal nature, and we have to, even at a point, kill ourselves and kill our ego. And the story that I bring up with is the Abrahamic sacrifice. And with Naaman here, I think it was his Abrahamic sacrifice. And I think that all of us, you're going to have an Abrahamic, and you're probably in the midst of an Abrahamic. Life is always the hardest thing ever, because it's our life. And so you're in an Abrahamic sacrifice right now, and you have to be able to give that thing which is most meaningful to you. And I want to talk about the Abrahamic story just real quickly, but before I say that, I just love the quote of I'm slaughtering this, so help me out. I think it's French. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, where he says, "We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings have human experience." And we get that wrong all the time, that we are gods. Like, he sent us here, like we're on his errand. And if we've committed our life to him, he has a plan for us, and it may not make sense to our left brain thinking, but we have to trust, and trusting and being like water is really hard. And so that brings me back to the Abrahamic sacrifice. If you think of Abraham, he waited most of his life for a son, and then he kind of got one with Tamar, but it wasn't like his true son with his wife. And finally he got one after years of praying, so many years. This was like his pride and joy. It was his world. Isaac, right? Am I getting that right? Isaac. And not only that, but Abraham keenly remembers sacrificing sons because his own father tried to kill him, and that was the whole impetus for him to go leave the comfort of Egypt and the city and go be in the sticks, which is definitely that's not an easy thing to do. And so he definitely would have been keenly remembering when he left, and how scary that was for him. And now he was willing to sacrifice his son, who he loved, in a very similar pattern that he had, different context, that was evil. And that was the hardest thing for Abraham to do, and that's why it was asked of him. And because he fulfilled that, then he was given the blessing of being the father of the nation, and being really one of our spiritual fathers. And so I think that you, listening to this, if you can pray and say, "God, lead me," it's gonna be very, maybe to your left brain thinking, or from someone else's perspective, it's going to be just bathing in the Jordan River. But internally, it's going to be the hardest thing for you. Trust is definitely a muscle. And just like forgiveness takes more strength than it does to get revenge. That's a spiritual muscle. Just spirituality teaches us that, the most difficult life lesson is that you are not God. The world does not revolve around me, and people have their own agencies. And how can I be tolerant of others' intolerance towards me? But if you can let go and know that God has everything, that he's going to prevail, as President Russell M. Nelson, our prophet, that's really been his admonition for us, is that let God prevail in your life, and that he's much bigger than anything else. And then as you do that, your irritability, your judgments, your self-centeredness will melt away, and you can put it in its proper frame. Spirituality really gives you an ability, that eternal perspective, to put your problems that seem like the weight of the world on your shoulders. It's really just a crumb in his hands. It's much smaller. If I could share a story, I was told, I had a very spiritual experience where I was told that I was going to be a chaplain. And that was a confirmation that I had not expected. I even had, I think, 4 different mentors say, Ryan, you should be a chaplain in the Army. And I was like, no, I poo-pooed it and I didn't want to do that. And finally, I talked to somebody about what I wanted to do, which was to be a Korean linguist in military intelligence. And he was telling me more about the job description. And I was like, that doesn't actually sound what I wanted to do. And so I was open for the first time in, I'm 24 years old, and I had been open, and I had received a calling from God that was more clear than anything I've ever had in my life, that Ryan, you are going to be a champion. Pursue that path. And so I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And eventually I did, I guess, somewhat subjective, but I remember each Thursday I would have a little trail run up to the Y Mountain at BYU when I was there. And I would sit at the top of Y Mountain, look over the campus, BYU campus, which if I put to my thumb, I could cover the whole campus with my thumb. And I was like, look, all my problems are like in this thing. And I could see the Utah Valley, I could see the point of the mountain. And it was interesting, and it gave me a new perspective. And I was like, the Utah Valley is so small compared to the world, and this is God of the universe has promised me to be a chaplain. And even just with the thumb up to my eyeball, I can cover the whole BYU campus. Then he's so much greater than my problem. And if he told me that I can be a chaplain, and he was also telling me that I would be able to get into BYU, which seemed impossible. And I remember pursuing that in the ROTC, and I knew that I had to apply for master's program. And there was one day that it was very discouraging, among many others, but I took a midterm test in a political science class, and there was a piece of paper that the teacher passed out, and it had your student number. So there was no names on it, but it had everyone's student number. And so you knew your student number, but nobody else did. And then it had everyone's grade. So you could see everyone else's grade, but you didn't know who they belonged to. Anyway, so I pull out I'll go down the list, and I see my student number, and I got a D. I got a D on it, and I was like, oh, this is not good. But I was like, usually people don't do very well on this. Maybe it will be, and he usually kind of curved it. He was a hard teacher, but I looked at it and I got the lowest grade in the class. And I was like, no, this is a bad grade. This is not good. And a lot of the weight of my grade came from this midterm, and it wasn't the final one, but I was looking at possibly getting a D in the course. And I don't think I remembered anything else for that class. And I just remember walking home just like, I'm the dumbest person in my class. How in the world am I able to apply and to advance and get a master's degree, which only a few people, my peers, were going to go on to do. And I was just like, there's no way it's impossible for me to get into master's degree, let alone BYU, which was very competitive. And I just kind of gave up. Wu Wei, the Confucius Wu Wei principle, I just gave up, and I just stopped toiling for just a brief second to my moment of grace, I guess. And my discouragement, I couldn't be any more discouraged. And I said, just gave up. And that's kind of when I started like offering it to God. I was like, God, what do you want me to do with this? And I was like kind of open to hearing. And the thought came to me very strongly, Ryan, I gave you that D, or this D. Yep, that's your skill set. That's where you're at. And this is so you can know that you're going to get into a master's program, not because of your genius, you're smart. It's not going to be on your toiling, your effort. You will know that you got into the BYU master's program because I brought, and it just shocked me. And I would continue to go up each Thursday and Y Mountain. I don't know if I got continued D's, but I wasn't rocking any of my grades. And I even took the GRE, and I didn't do what I was recommended. I talked to the dean and said, what does my GPA need to be? What do I need to get on my GRE? And both of those, I think I took the GRE 3 times. All 3 times my score was lower than was required to be competitive to get in. But let alone, I still applied, and I applied for some other programs. And if I could end this story up here, it has a happy ending. I applied and I got a rejection from BYU, like a rejection letter, and it said thank you for applying, but you're not accepted. And I was crestfallen. I was like, what? And like, there's no way I can get into BYU now. Like, they already like gave me an official letter. It was over. And I was like, I think that's when I didn't do I stopped doing those Thursday Y Mountain runs, and I abandoned all hope. And then I had applied for some other places, and one other place I think I had applied to 4, and Claremont University, California had accepted me. So I was like, okay, I still had to pay for it all, and it was like 40,000 a year and or more, and I was like, or a semester, and but that was where I was gonna go. So anyway, the day I made a decision I was gonna contact Claremont University and tell them that I was gonna go there. But I had known that I had this spiritual feeling that I was gonna go to BYU, but I didn't have a way. Well, just as I had my flip phone at the time. This was back in 2009, 2010. And I had my flip phone, and I think I was literally going to call Claremont University and say, because I had a number and I was going to confirm that I was going to go there. And as I was doing that, I got a call, and it's 801 number. So I answered it, and it was the military relations department at the church. And they had said, you were number 14 out of the 13 applicants, and one of the people that we had given admittance to said that he wants to go somewhere else, and so there's an extra slot. Do you want it? And so I was like, yay! And I really wanted that, and I had felt like that was the right thing for me. So, and I remember at that time I said, you know what? I'm never going to doubt. If I get a spiritual feeling, even though my head doesn't make sense, going believe it. Been many times since then that similar things have happened, just confirming you need to hold on to that spiritual, that life is not happening to you. You're not just wandering through life, and maybe sometimes you get lucky. Like, everything that's happening is for you and for your good and is for you. And maybe it's not, but that belief, if you can believe that, changes how you respond rather than react to life, take action. And so hopefully in this story that you see that maybe when things don't seem like they're going the way, or you're called to do things, you need to crucify your ego, and not, maybe you're asked to raise a family, and that's like the hardest thing in the world for you to do, or just have patience with your boss or something. That is your cross, is what you need to do. That is your thorn in your side, and that's the gift that God gave you. He gave it to you. Think of solutions on how to overcome.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. That was very profound, very impactful. And on that note, we should probably end, but there was one other thing that I wanted to reiterate that you had shared is by Perrier Teilhard de Chardin, where it says, we are not human beings having a spiritual experience, but we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And I think the story that you just shared was kind of that struggle that you had between, was your human side going to dominate, or was your spiritual side going to dominate? And I think that is something that we can all relate to, because we have a mind that can run wild and can be a wonderful tool, but in the mind is where our fears and anxieties live. And we have a body that can be very wonderful as well, but it can also bring appetites and desires and things that, if not properly maintained or controlled, can lead to our ruin. But we also have a spirit, and in spirit, things are, if you will, perfect. It's peace, it is harmony, and I think there is wisdom and value in addressing our lives in the moment and asking ourselves, am I in my mind, or am I in my body, or am I in my spirit? And if you are not in your spirit, then get there, because that is the place that you need to reside. As we're in our spiritual frame, things will flow better, they work better. And although it might be hard, it will, as we can look back, and as Ryan gave a great example, being able to reflect on his full experience and connected the dots after, the spirit always prevails.
And the most common, is that okay?
Yeah.
The most common admonition, in the most repeated counsel in the scriptures, is fear not. Let your faith overcome your doubts. And when you're men are that they might have joy, as the Book of Mormon teaches. If you're not having joy in your life, if you feel like you're overcome with anxiety, despair, you're doing something wrong and you're not putting that in the proper perspective. And there's a need for more spirituality. If anxiety and stress are the temperature, your emotional temperature, the thermostat of your life, the default emotional home base, then your spiritual arm needs to be strengthened. Place it on God. Fear not, He has this. That you just put it in its proper place and it will work itself out. You are called to His holy calling. He has this. He has it for you, and it's your job just to listen to know what it is, rather than you to direct the wind, the sails, and when I say sails, I'm not talking only about the sails of your boat, but the sails that maybe that will keep your business running, that He's going to direct the right customers to you. And when God closes a door, He always opens another. When it seems bleak and hopeless, that maybe is your best time your rock bottom can be your foundation that you can start building anew. Boyd K. Packer said, the study of doctrine changes behavior better than the study of behavior changes behavior. And that may be paraphrased, but that's the point. And what he's really saying there is that if you start taking the thing that really is going to change your behavior and make you rise to the occasion to be the leader that you need to be, to have the marriage, to have the relationships, to have the business that you need, it's studying the doctrine. And the doctrine is your true identity. When you understand that you are God's, that He's bought you with a price, I think maybe the thing that really brings so much, really speaks to my heart, is you being evil know how to give good gifts to your children. So I, being perfect, of course I know how to give good gifts to you. Your life is your gift that God has given to you, and it is the perfect thing for you, and it's your job to figure out how that makes sense. And so as you understand that God has you can go wherever you are in your life. It's the perfect thing. Trust that have faith in faith. And what I mean by that is you have faith maybe when it doesn't make sense. You just have faith that somehow, some way, it will make sense if you just keep pushing.
Thank you so much. If there's nothing else, I'd say you've done a great job.
That's all for today. We are grateful for you. Thank you for joining the TTT. We're proud of you and the courage you demonstrate to live with integrity, your true identity as God and goddesses. We're going to love you and leave you. Till next time.
Peace.